joining us now is Alex Zielinski. She is a health reporter at Think Progress. Before that, she was at Atlantic Media. She was in Portland, writing for the Portland Mercury and Street Roots there. She has been featured in a number of other publications as well. And she's been covering what I consider to be a very important story right now, and that is the story of the Stanford rape case that has gotten so much coverage lately. Alex, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So, listen, let's start out with this. What are the basics? What's the basic story of the Stanford rape case?
Yeah, it's a bit tricky since, it actually happened over a year ago, the rape itself, the sexual assault. And so it was kind of a statewide thing then. And now just in the past week or so, it's become a national and global kind of topic. And that's because Brock Turner, this ex-Stanford student who was a freshman at the time, had a sentencing trial last Thursday. And at that trial, he was handed a sentence that many people see to be very lenient of 6 months in a county jail as opposed to prison or kind of like the other recommendations a lot of advocates say should be given to him. And so kind of walking away with that has kind of sparked the most recent news. But the case itself is tricky. It's blurry. But it comes down basically to a 19-year-old college freshman sexually assaulting a woman who was unconscious and intoxicated and out in public. And very non-consensual, and it kind of leads us to where we are now.
Yeah, and correct me if I'm wrong, but there are a couple other things about this case that are striking. One is that the sentence has received a great deal of criticism, enormous amount of criticism for being too light given the severity of the crime. It has also received criticism from the defendant's friends and family, particularly his father, who have pleaded for lenience on his behalf. There's, I think, a couple of the dimensions of this case that make it especially noteworthy. I mean, every rape is a tragedy, but that bring this special attention. One is, I would say two letters are important dimensions of this case. One letter was from the rape victim herself, and it was extremely eloquent. It was lengthy. It went into a great deal of description of the severity of the crime against her, the strong, harmful psychological impact it had on her, and so on. So that was one letter. The other was a letter from the defendant's father talking about how unhappy being convicted of rape has made him, essentially. So I think those two things together, right?
I'd add that there's probably at least one more letter that kind of came out right at the front of this discussion from his friend, one of the women, a friend of his from childhood that he, her name is Leslie, I believe, and she also kind of had there were some phrases in her letter that kind of angered a lot of folks with, relying, kind of seeming to be victim blaming and very biased. But, since then there have been at least, 25 other letters that have emerged from it all. This morning, the Santa Clara Sheriff's Department kind of dumped all the documents, all of the, court filings and letters and all these things kind of into the hands of all the journalists that have been requesting it. And so in that were, these original letters, but then a large package of other ones as well that people haven't even had the chance to swim through yet.
So I guess and the letter from the friend that you're talking about, and you reported about on Think Progress, the letter from the friend of Brock Turner, is the one that said that he's not, quote unquote, a real rapist, and urging the judge not to be quote unquote politically correct. I'm so sick of hearing these young men are monsters when really you're throwing barely 20 sometimes into these camp like university environments. These are idiot boys and girls having too much to drink. Um, these are not rapists, completely different from a woman getting kidnapped and raped as she is walking to her car in a parking lot. So I guess, so here you have, uh, but I guess that does, in a sense, also get to the heart of this case. And we're all still kind of processing it, I guess. But maybe that is a question we should ponder for a second. What is a real? How is Brock Turner, convicted of rape, not a real rapist in the sense of someone who might follow a woman to her car and then rape her there? What's the? I know I'm asking you to go outside the reportorial
Yeah. No, of course.
mode a little bit, but what's the difference between what he did, which was to take an unconscious woman, take her clothes off, drag her so that she had pine needles throughout her body, and invade her body while she was unconscious, so much so that two, I guess, Swedish graduate students intervened and chased him down and were crying afterwards, recalling the incident. How I don't see the difference.
Yeah, there's absolutely no difference. And I think that is the point that all of kind of supporters of Brock and people that, family, friends, people who love him and support him, can't see past. Unfortunately, it's kind of this, um, this young kid who has kind of a lot going for him. He has this, swimming career and part of a strong community, wealthy community. Um, that's just not the face that people picture when they picture a rapist. And they don't picture their son, they don't picture their friend, it's I'm sure very hard to admit that that is what really happened. And I think that can be the only reason that his friend didn't see him as a rapist. But there is absolutely no difference from kidnapping someone uh, on their way to their car, or there's thousands of scenarios that make you a rapist, and it doesn't matter how long it lasts, where it happens, how drunk you are. It's pretty cut and dry.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's so many dimensions to this story, and we're talking with Alex Zielinski of Think Progress about the Brock Turner rape case. There's so many dimensions to this story, but one of them is, the judge said that Mr. Turner, young Mr. Turner, quote unquote, exhibited genuine feelings of remorse, and also that was happy about the fact that Brock Turner says he's going to enter into a program to educate college students about the effects of excessive drinking and sexual promiscuity. I think the whole role of drinking in all of this is it's possible. Well, I don't know the young man, but it's possible that he might not have done this had he not been drunk. But it seems to me, first of all, that when drinking is brought into this case, number one, there's an implicit suggestion that it's less of an offense to rape a woman because she's drunk. I mean, nobody would say it was less of an.
You're drunk because he was drunk as well.
Well, no, I want to talk about both sides of it. Right.
Okay.
One is that his defense that he was drunk. The other, though, I think whenever I hear people, including his friends, bring up, well, college drinking, a lot of times when it's brought up is, well, you go out and you get drunk, meaning her. Well, what do you expect? As if somehow, you hear that sort of thing, as if somehow a woman being drunk has less of a right to have crimes not committed against her. You understand where I'm going, right? And so I think let's start with that the notion that somehow quote unquote and a culture of college drinking somehow means that she is somehow at fault. Well, nobody who is robbed, I just don't get that line of thinking. Am I missing something?
No, it's so unique to this specific case. I mean, not this specific incident, but just any rape cases like this. It always One of the first things that's always questioned is kind of the backstory of the victim, and like what did they do to set themselves up for this to happen to them, because it must have been something that they were responsible of doing, which, like you said, a robbery, if someone ran into your car, like you the victim there is never, you can't be blamed for having your laptop stolen out of your bag because you had a laptop. I mean, that could just go down such a slippery slope,
Right.
Um,
Look, I was robbed at knife point on the way to a rock and roll concert in the Lower East Side when it was dangerous to go into the Lower East Side. When the police came, they didn't say, "Well, look at what you were wearing."
exactly,
You know,
exactly.
and then there's the flip side of it, which says that, Brock, which you mentioned, which Brock Turner said, "Well, I was drunk." That's first of all, to me, again, we're talking about a rape tolerant culture, in my opinion, and that's my personal opinion. A lot of people, a lot of men get drunk and don't rape women. It's just not part of their programming. And if in fact drinking makes you more likely to commit a crime, you shouldn't drink. If in fact you committed a crime and part of the reason you committed a crime was your judgment was impeded by alcohol, plead guilty to the crime. Don't deny the crime as this guy did. Plead guilty. And then, if he wants this kid says he wants to educate people on drinking. Educate people about rape.
Yeah, and it, I think that's the way that he's really sidestepped. I mean, he has yet to acknowledge or apologize or address that he sexually assaulted this woman. He says it's consensual. Of course, he's the only one who has this memory, and is the only one that his attorneys say they can trust with that opinion. Um, and the fact that he's kind of bundled this all up into like a peer pressure situation, or like this is what everyone else was doing so I had to do it. That doesn't, I mean, there's so many examples of that growing up as a kid also. Like that's not how you take responsibility for those things. That's, your free will is still very valid, even if that means deciding to drink alcohol.
And he had the presence of mind to run when people said, "What are you doing?" And by the way, if you really feel it was a consensual act, why run?
Right.
Um,
I run and leave this woman, still half naked on the ground. Um, it just really doesn't. The story doesn't piece together. And this morning I've been looking through all of these documents that have been coming in, and kind of seeing his story being told through other people's eyes, and his own letter, and kind of through the probation officer. And I'm having a really hard time seeing the stories line up. It just seems, there's just too many parts that kind of contradict each other.
I'm glad to hear you say that because it sure didn't hang together for me, Alex Zielinski, and just a little bit. I haven't read all the additional material you've read, and I also feel, I'm just, and I'm sorry that I'm not usually this emotional in an interview, but I feel so strongly about this case. I'm just so damn sick and tired of the phony remorse, of the kind of public apology. To me, it goes along. It's a much more offensive version of the "well, I'm sorry if you were offended" apology. There's the apology without taking responsibility, and I just feel there's nothing. And the father should be publicly expressing remorse for having raised a rapist, as far as I'm concerned. He should be asking himself, what did I do wrong that my son, who presumably to a certain extent modeled his manhood on me, was capable of doing that. I'm just really, really
Right.
upset about this case.
It's more offensive to almost, there's no closure in this kind of case. Apparently he's being punished for this crime, even if it might not be um, really that much time at all. But the fact that he still won't, just straight out say, I mean, he was convicted for these things. So the truth is out there, it's on the table. The jury decided he did sexually assault this woman, but he still he still holds true to this idea that it's consensual. When really at this point, I feel like he would be so much more respected for just coming clean about, this terrible thing he did.
Yes, if he did, and his friends did, and his family did, and we only have about a minute, but in the minute that's left, also the judge is there's a movement afoot to recall him
Right.
based on the lightness of the perceived lightness of the sentence. Any thoughts on that before we go?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very interesting. That the judge, it's also been noted he's this former Stanford athlete as well. And so a lot of people kind of say that there's some bias there. And he seemed very forgiving, in his sentencing. So that's kind of where this recall effort is coming from. And right now, from what I've seen, the kind of campaign behind this has been raising a lot of money, and kind of getting the momentum going to actually, educate people in this next year or so before there's actually a real election in California to recall this judge. But it's hard to say if this momentum will keep up over the next few months before they can even get something on the ballot. And yeah, I mean, granted, this judge's decision really irked some people and kind of needs more explaining. Um, but I think part of the system as well is questioning how do the courts look at rape cases. I mean, the attorney and the judge, sure, maybe they were just doing their job, but it's the system that might be making it even more difficult for these cases to go through. And maybe we need to kind of reevaluate how rape cases are different than robberies or any of these things when it comes to a trial.
Absolutely. I think that's so important. So, Alex Zielinski of Think Progress, thanks for your great reporting on this story, and thanks for coming on the program.
Thank you.